My name is Emanuele Busacca, and I work in IFOAM Organics Europe on regulatory issues. Today we have two sessions. I will have the honor to moderate the session on the new organic regulation, what will change. And immediately after, my colleague Eva will guide you through the session Rural Development, Long-Term Vision for Rural Areas. Before starting, some technicalities. You can and you should actively participate at the event. It is very simple. On the right side of the live stream under session, you can see chat and Slido, as well people and Twitter. With chat, you can chat between participants, but please do not ask a question to the speakers. We will not be able to read your question through this function. Instead, you can ask questions to the speakers through the Slido function Q&A. You can also see the list of participants and connect to like-minded people. Also, do not forget that you can follow in two languages, English and Portuguese. You go to Stages section and you can choose your languages. If you are experiencing any technical issues, address them in the chat and someone from the organizational team will assist you. But let's start now with a question to the audience. So to you, again, you should go in Slido and then in polls on your right side, and then you will find the question if you are familiar with the organic regulation, or how much familiar are you with the organic regulation. Possible answer are yes, not an expert, but I know about it, and no. So please let us know, at least we know what kind of audience we are speaking. We will see the answer in the clouds in a few seconds as well, and we will comment on them. But we can already go to the first panel. We are very lucky today because we have a very high level speakers for the topic we will cover. In fact, today with us we have Elena Paniti. She's the head of the organics unit in DG Agri, European Commission. So good morning, Elena. Elena, instead of the usual ice-breaking questions, just to know if your microphone works and if you can hear as well, I have not an usual ice-breaking question, but a different one, because the European Organic Congress is not the only European event these days. There is also the European Football Championship, but it will be, of course, too easy to ask you which team you support. Therefore, I will ask you instead which team you want Italy plays with in the final, just to see if your microphone works.
Well, I have to say that I'm a very basic football supporter, but it's true that these events are very good to get a bit of a European spirit. I would wish some very, well, France would be really a very interesting, Italy-France would be really a very interesting football team. But I don't know if they can really match in the ski. But if I could choose, it would be France.
Yes, yeah, thank you. With France is always an interesting match. You are right. Thank you, Elena. And then we have Marian Blom, Vice President of IFOAM Organics Europe. She's expert in regulation since many years. She also work in Bionex, that is the Dutch organic umbrella organization. So Mariam, which team you want the Netherlands plays with in the final?
Well, actually, I think Italy would be a good party to play with. I know there are many Dutch players that also play in Italian teams normally, but now they are coming out for their own nation, so it would be really interesting to see them play against Italy. And yeah.
Okay, thank you. And Michel Renaud, board member of IFOAM Organics Europe, expert in certification and international trade since many years as well, vice president of EcoCert, proud supporter of France in the football championship. So Michel, I think the final will be Netherlands, Italy. So which team you want France plays with in the semi-final?
Yes, as you know, I'm French living in Germany, so I have already a hard week behind me. I wish Belgium.
That's also
because we
good.
have a story with Belgium since the last World Cup. So I hope we will play better and win. But instead, last time we do not play so good, but we win. So let's see. But if Netherlands Italian, it will be also a nice final, and I will also look it.
We have very good scenarios. Let's see. Thank you, Michel, also to you. And let's move back now from football to organic again. So a new EU organic regulation will come into application in few months from 1st January 2022. The Basic Act was published in June 2018, and now the secondary legislation, the so-called implementing and delegated acts. So the secondary legislation is being developed. 9 acts have already been published. Other 14, 15 will be published by the end of this year. And the discussion between the Commission and the member states are ongoing since 2018. In particular, now there are discussions on international trade, imports, but also a bit of control. So the first question is for Elena. It is in fact on the process. So please, Elena, can you please give us an update of the legislative process for the secondary legislation, and giving also an idea of when the full set of regulation will be ready and published. Thank you, Elena.
As you already rightly said, the new organic regulation was published in 2019. It was supposed to enter into application this year, but for the reasons that we all know, because some delays due to the production of the secondary legislation slowed down by the COVID, we had to postpone it to next year. So 2022. The secondary legislation, as you rightly said, is made up by a number of acts, 13 delegated acts and 6 implementing acts. Now, what did we do since 2018 until now? We have started producing the secondary legislation. We have divided the blocks into the regulation into 3 blocks: production rules, control rules, and trade rules. And there we have analyzed also what was the compulsory legislation that we had to develop and what was optional. So what was covered by the shall clause and what was covered by a may clause. Therefore, to go to the substance, we started with the production rule. And there we have worked on 2 implementing acts. One has already been published since quite a while. It was published in March last year, and it's the implementing regulation on the production rule. The Basic Act, it's true, it's already very dense of rules and information about production. You have the annexes which give already a full picture on what are the rules to apply, but still in the implementing act, it spells out certain provisions, in particular for the retroactive recognition and information to be provided by member states beside some other information on the production rules for animals. Then the second implementing act, it's all about to be published, and it's the regulation on the products and substances that will be authorized in organics. This is a regulation that was longly discussed with the member states, together also with the support of the ECTOP. So it's the scientific committee that gives us the advice on the substances that can be used in organics. And it's about to be voted by the member states and should be published before summer. Then we have a whole set of supplementing, amending regulations, so delegated act amending the regulation, which we published 5 amending regulation on different topics: seeds and mix of fodder, sprouted seeds and chicory heads, feed for certain aquaculture animals and aquaculture parasite treatments. The use, derogation for the use of in conversion and non-organic plant reproductive material, another delegated act on the juveniles for aquaculture, and another delegated act for the requirements for record keeping. These are all delegated acts amending the regulation, and I will explain afterwards how all of these will articulate for the final reading of the regulation. And then we also produced a delegated act supplementing the regulation for the exceptional production rule. When it comes to the publication, all of these acts have been published, with exception, as I said, of the implementing on the substances will be soon published, and the one on the record keeping that will be published rather in September. Then we moved to the block on control, and there we had one delegated act supplementing, two delegated acts amending the regulation, and one implementing regulation. So delegated act amending, one was dealing with the group of operators, and the second one dealt with the model of certificates. The delegated act supplementing the regulation was on the checks of the documentary account in the framework of the official controls, while the implementing act dealt with the measures on control and other measures to ensure traceability. When it comes to the publication of these acts, then we have the delegated amending was published, as well as the supplementing regulation was published, and the implementing regulation was published too. We are only waiting for the publication of the amending regulation on the model of certificate that should be published by mid-June. Then I come to a quick conclusion on the third block, which is the one on trade. This is a bit still not in the making, because everything has already been published in the for the feedback mechanism. So the sector is aware of the content of all the regulations that we are planning there. And there, what do we have? We have a set of delegated act amending and supplementing. These two acts, one amending and one supplementing, are those acts that will recreate, I would say, the control system in for the operations in third countries, because of course there you cannot apply the official control regulations. So it is rather a regulation that creates common rules for the application in third countries. Then we have a supplementing act, which is, I would say, so-called transitionary measures for the current rules into the next 3 years, because as you know, compliance will fully enter into application only 3 years after the entry into application of the regulation, and therefore there is still 3 years in which the current rules will have to apply. And then we have one implementing act which will be repealing, so taking all the current annexes of the 1235. So it will be what we call the new 1235 that will really make a transition from this current regulation into the next one of the control bodies and third countries that will be recognized by the EU. And there is another implementing regulation that will lay down the provisions on the certificate of operators and also will contain the list of the control bodies which in the future will be recognized as compliant. Where are we with the publication of this act? Those regulations that are, let's say, creating the frame for third countries are to be published in October. The transitionary measures will be published at the end of July, while of course, the one that will be published late in the year is the one repealing the 1235, and there we will have so it will stop the activities of the 1235, and it's going to be published at the very end. And then the last two is an implementing act and a delegated act supplementing, which are creating the conditions for the imports of product at the border control post. In fact, it was brought to our attention by the member states that the official control regulation and organic regulation were referring to the official control regulation when it comes to imports of organic product, and that would have caused quite some difficulties in rerouting the imports to different border control posts or different point of release into free circulation. So we found out a way in order to not to interfere with the current situation and try to keep as much as possible the status quo. Now, how will this list of regulation be read? The Basic Act will be amended by the amending regulation. So that means that all the amending regulations that have been published will be consolidated into the Basic Act. That means that you will have the Basic Act will contain all the amendments that are brought by the amending regulation. Then we will have a document to, on the other hand, supplementing regulation cannot be consolidated into the Basic Act because, of course, they are supplementing, and then we will have the implementing regulations. Surely we will find a way to have a sort of global overview for operators so as to easy the reading of the document and easy the comprehension of how these regulations are interlinked among them. So that's it. So I think it was pretty complete. If you have other questions.
Thank you very much, Elena, for this update. In the meantime, we have also the feedback of the polls. And at the beginning, I said that we have a high-level panel for regulation, but in reality, we have also a high-level audience because 50% of the audience is quite familiar with the regulation. And this is good to know that there are many people familiar with the new organic regulation. This is something very good because we have to apply in a few months. Okay, thank you for showing it. And so next question instead is to Marian. So Marian, the question for you is, what are the short and medium term challenges on production rules? So it means processing, farming, trading, also importing, and how they can be addressed.
Yes, thank you, Emanuele. And also thank you, Elena, for this overview. It shows how a lot of work has been done and still some hard work to be done in the coming months. But yeah, when I prepared this contribution, I thought about four words that for me sort of summarize the challenges that are ahead. And if I describe these words, these are complexity, harmonization, horizontalization, and perspective. And I will shortly explain why I chose those words. First, the complexity. Well, listening at Elena's explanation of all the implementing acts and delegated acts, there is a lot on the table. And we are at the end of the year, all the secondary legislation will be finalized. And actually then that's the moment where we can really grasp and study what has changed. And it's difficult reading because there are already in the Basic Act, there are quite many cross-references in the text. There are also references to delegated and implementing acts. And there are also references to horizontal text for definitions and relevant articles. And even if you are of goodwill and you want to follow this new regulation, it will certainly in the beginning of 2022, it will be difficult to know exactly what to do. And I think we need some hard work from the side of the people that are under the organic control system, the farmers, the processors, and the traders, but also some flexibility from the side of the CBs, the governments, to make this new regulation really a success. The second word that I mentioned to describe what I think is a challenge is harmonization. And what you see at this new regulation is that a higher level of detail has been brought into on the European level. And there are things that used to be regulated on a national level and that are now brought up to the European level. There are some examples, for instance, the conditions for retroactive conversion of land, the exemptions for chicory heads, if they can be forced on water or not. That's something that Elena also mentioned. Also rules for poultry and pig stables, very detailed. And it may be for a good reason to avoid unfair competition and to have a clear level playing field of what is allowed in organic or not. But it's quite obvious that there is a border to it. It's a limit to it. There must be a balance between this uniformity and the possibility for local adaptation. And the reason for that is actually very simple. It's because agriculture and food production is not the same in every country. And especially agriculture. Even within a country, there are many differences. Maybe for the Netherlands, we are a small country, we're flat. It's more or less similar, but even there I can see some differences. But especially in large countries like Germany, Spain, Italy, or France, there are very mountainous areas where farming means something completely different than in the more flatter areas. And I think we should allow some space in this regulation and in the way to use it in the coming years for local adaptations. So I think that's something that we need to be aware of, because this call for unfair competition may lead to a uniformization that is in the end a negative development for the organic sector in Europe. A third word, where I'm not sure even if it's English, it's horizontalization. And I will explain what I mean with that. In the organic regulation, there are more and more checks and alignment with other rules in the European Union. If you are allowed to use a substance in organic farming or food processing, this list of substances has to be aligned with the horizontal legislation. It has to be aligned with the food additive legislation, with the pesticide legislation, with the fertilizer legislation that is already in place. What it does, it introduces actually the logic of the other regulations in the organic farming legislation. And it can be really bad because organic farming has a system thinking where, because of the system, you set boundaries to what you're allowed to use and the way you use it. Maybe I give a small example to make it clear what I mean. The substance of quassia is a substance that is used in organic fruit growing. It has been used by organic fruit growers for many, many years. And now we are in the process of having a registration there as a basic substance. It's a category in the pesticide legislation. We're not there yet. But in the meantime, the topic, the substance, is being deleted from the list of allowed substances in organic farming. And this is just one example, but I think that with the ambition to make organic farming a substantial part, and I would even say a flagship of European agriculture, it may not be too bold to ask that with drafting horizontal legislation, the organic systems approach and the organic sector should be taken into account, because it sort of reverses what we're doing now. The fourth chapter or challenge is what I summarize under the word perspective. And with perspective, I mean that one change of a word in the organic regulation may seem small, tiny, but in the end, it could mean the end of business for an organic operator, a farmer or a food processor or a trader. And I think we should be really careful to see what a change in wording has as an effect. And I think we should keep into account that these effects, well, they are there, and we must deal with it. And in the coming period, we must see how we can solve these consequences that are sometimes unforeseen. Again, some examples. Well, in the livestock, there is a lot of discussion on livestock rules in organic farming and the new rules. There's one thing, at least I know from the Netherlands, that there is a change in the way that the indoor area for pigs is calculated if you have to take the area that is taken in by the feeders into account. It's a change, but it may mean, sounds little, but it may mean that a pig farmer has to decrease the number of animals or has to do big investments in his stable. Another example that is probably not intentional is the changing role or the changing situation for pet food. There are some producers in Europe that produce organic cat food and dog food. They do it on the basis of national rules. And they have been doing it for decades. And it's a fast growing market because more and more consumers want to feed also their home animals with good food. In the new regulation, pet food is under the same category as feed. And as a consequence, not all the pet food producers or the pet food producers are not able anymore to produce the food in the way they did it. And it's not sure that we are able to solve their problems, or the European institutions are able to solve this problem before the entering into force of the new regulation. And I think we need to find a solution for this situation. The third example I want to give is for flavoring. We are allowed to use natural flavorings in organic food processing. And actually, it's a good thing that now it's clarified that you can also make organic flavorings from organic agricultural products. I think it's a very good development. And the use of natural flavorings has been decreased a bit. You cannot use all the categories we're used to use. It is tiny. It's a reference to 2 letters less in a reference of an article, but it means that many products will have to be reformulated, will have to be reinvented. Producers will have to look for the flavorings in the qualities that they are used to, that they like to work it, and to have to find it. And it takes time. And it's one of the things that has, I think, a bigger impact than was foreseen at the moment. It's not negative, but it's the complexity that comes from it, and it only shows now in these months and probably in the coming months and even coming year. And I could go on, Emanuela, naming more, but I think I stay with this. I think I far exceeded my 5 minutes.
Yes.
Thank you for allowing me.
Yes, thank you, Marian. Thank you very much. Unfortunately, 1 hour for the new organic regulation is really not enough time. But as we heard from you, there are challenges, and we are sure that no one had the intention, nor the Commission, nor the Parliament, nor the Council, to have some consequences that or keeping to these challenges, let's say. But now we have, as Marian said, we have to find a way to address them in a constructive way, all together, member states, Commission, and sector. Okay, thank you, Marian. We will go now to Michelle instead for, let's say, the short and medium-term challenges on control, certification, and international trade. So please, Michelle.
Yes, thank you, Emanuele. And I would say first, for each new regulation coming into force, it's always a challenge, and it's not specific to organic. I think it's always challenging, and I think organic is there's no exception from these general rules. There are many challenges on the we'll say control, certification, and trade rules. First, there was one which is still a challenge, and since many years, or is the management of pesticide residue. We know it's not new, so it's not really only linked to the new regulations. Still, we have no an harmonization, but everyone, I think, effort was done by the Commission to try to come to harmonization, but we have also to deal with the member states. Second, maybe we will come later on this subject. I pick up some points. There is one, I think it's very interesting, is the annual verification of compliance. As we know, it must be once a year and normally a physical meeting. And now we have a derogation for some cases where it will not be only a physical meeting, but we have to find to have a verification of the conformity without a physical inspection. And it's a challenge, but I think it's also, if we are positive, we must see this as an opportunity. And I think also we have learned quite a lot from the pandemic situations, and we have seen how the commissions and the certification bodies and operators have reacted and tried to adapt and find solutions. I think the challenge is how we will look like this verification of conformity without physical inspection. We have seen that is it only document review? Is it remote inspection or other aspect? And I think it's very interesting to be inspired by what we have had in 20 and also at the beginning of 2021. And I think we have time in 2022 to have a discussions, all stakeholders and also the commissions to try to design a little bit, maybe I would not say into details, but into principle, what we do understand by these verifications of compliance. It could be very interesting to also to open a door to the futures of the certification. So I think it's really a great opportunity, and I think IFOAM is really willing also to give some input on this. And but as I say, could be once the secondary legislation is completely finalized and people have a little bit more time to come into and to have a discussion on this. There's another issue concerning the certificates, or I would say a challenge, and I will say it's much more a technical challenge. We really welcome that the certificate will be put into traces in the near futures, and I think it's really something we all wait since years, and I think it's very good we come to this. But just want to say that each control bodies or control authorities have their information or IT systems, and we must really find a really smooth transfer on data exchanges between their systems and traces systems. And we must see some compatibility, and automatismus should be there. Otherwise, when we see the numbers of operators in Europe, and if we have to tip again in the system all the information, so it will be a crazy administrative burden, and I don't think it's the intention and the will of the Commission having traces is really to have a place where all certificates are located. A second one, but it's very more a remark than a challenge. As we speak in compliance in EU and in third countries, we would like that the model is the same model, especially in the mandatory parts. As we speak about compliance, there's no objective reasons to have different parts in the mandatory parts. We have seen in the past, during the discussion we have had with the frequency of control, where in the first draft there were differences, and at the end we come to a common approach and the same levels of frequency of controls. Group certifications, I think, is something new for some member states. For some of them who had this system before to access to the EU, maybe it's not so new. It's an opportunity for small-scale farmers, for sure. Concerning the control or group certification, which already exists in third country, many of them have their system into place, and they will be changed, especially in the structures of the group certifications. Some of them are organized under the umbrella of processors or exporters. They will have to change this, and this is really challenging for them. But the reason for me, it's like I would say like an appeal I would make to this group is really to start now this change and to work closely with their control authority or certification body to validate the change which are foreseen in the new regulations, and not to wait and to say it's impossible to do. I think it's very important to start now, and we will see also that there are, I would say, not flexibility, but there are many possibilities also for them, to set up also the ICS to what's already existing, to move to the new requirements. So, and another point which is really will be challenging is the percentage of sampling, which is 2% for numbers of members of the group. It will increase enormously compared to the present situations. And if we make the exercise with 2,000, which is the maximum number of members in a group, with 2,000, 2% is 40 analyses, and it takes time to take a sampling. It's between half an hour and an hour. It depends also on the situations. So it's already only 40 hours only by sampling. We will have also additional cost for the group. But also, I think we must keep in mind that it's really also in third countries complex, the situations, conservation of the samplings, finding also the labs to send in Europe or somewhere. So there will be huge, it's not only the cost of the analysis, but we will huge beside costs on this. And we really wish this risk approach. And my appeal will be also, okay, it's more or less no fix in the regulations. It is to assess the situation after maybe 1 year practices and to see if there's something we can move on. I understand the will to reinforce the control in third country, but I also want to point it out that it's always very important also to assess some things and that we can maybe correct also in the futures. Elena mentioned also the problematic on the control border point, and try to keep the statu quo as much as possible, and in order also to be in line with the horizontal legislation. I think it will be also in some member states or a challenge to change, because there is not the same competent authorities who are dealing today the organic, and it could be also needs for adaptation for them. But I think it's feasible. I do not see it really as a problem, but challenging for this. And also there, I think it's we will see if for example, when goods are coming from, I take the example of coming from Morocco, they will have to go on the border control point of Spain, but the importer will be in France. And when we will be, maybe some have difficulties or problems lead, there will be languages problems with operators with a member state, which already exists, I guess, in conventional also. But I think we will see how it will work and which of kind of problems. And as I say, with this new regulation, I think we should find a place, maybe 22, 23, to have a feedback also of the sectors, what has worked well, what does not work well, what we can implement. Because we cannot say from the start to say it will not work, but we identified maybe problems, but let's see if there are really problems, if we can quantify them, and try to find a place really where we will have times to assess this. And for me, it's really very important with new regulations to have a place for a middle term assessment on what it was, and try to correct, because by experience, we always discover really new things and new issues. And I think which will be my word. And the last, but I think it's not linked to the new regulation, but it's with a Brexit for all the products which are out of the scope of the trade and cooperation agreement, to see if it's already challenging for many operators within the EU, imported and re-exporting to the EU, and to see in the futures also if we can find a solution for this. So thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Michel. So we see many challenges. As you said, some of the challenges are also opportunities to develop organics. This is the positive side of seeing it. So please, Elena, please don't give let's say an answer to all the points that have been mentioned. Otherwise, we will not continue. Please, just an idea on how the sector really can contribute and can help you in after 2022 in really align well or correct sometimes the regulation.
Okay, no, thank you. It's very useful. I mean, we already had many discussions with you, with the sector, with all the parties, and we know that, I mean, it's a complex regulation, but it's also a complex sector. Don't forget, it's a sector that until a few years ago, it was a niche sector. Now it's really the mainstream at political level. We saw it with the 25%. I mean, there is a clear target from the Commission to have 25% of organic land in the next 10 years. That's a very good sign. That's a really positive sign that there is interest and there is a political value given to the sector. It's a sector that now alone it worth almost 40 billion euros. Then, of course, I mean, we acknowledge that this time spent in producing regulation has been long and complex. If you start thinking that the first proposal was put on the table in 2014, now we are in 2021. Well, I would say that we started the negotiations overall 7 years ago. But it's also now it's really time to read carefully through the regulation. We are always available for discussion. We already gave our availability for having a meeting on production rules later in the month, and really understand what is concretely in the text. Now, it's true that sometimes I'm a bit surprised about the certain issues that are raised by the sector, because I have the impression that certain issues were done status quo since many years. And if you think that the first regulation was 30 years ago, and in the current regulation, many of the rules were mutated, then I have the impression that certain rules were not either not clear, but nothing is really changing. Well, of course, the regulation harmonizes the provisions, but as Marian was saying, the harmonization should not go in the direction of the standardization or something like this. But the problem is that harmonization is necessary for, of course, for this growing sector, as I said, to create level playing field. But it's also the need to not to derogate to basic principles of the organic rules. I've seen sometimes I received letters, complaints from the sector saying that we were with the harmonization we would avoid certain derogations, but we were talking about derogations to basic principles of organic. So we also start thinking, reflecting, what do we want out of organics? Do we want to give a meaning to the logo? Do we want to stick to principles, or do we just want to say, okay, there's a set of rules that we can apply more or less? No, that's why I think that the new organic regulation harmonizes the rules for all the producers, give really a clear structure, creates a level playing field for operators, and it's really what we need to move on in this 25% organic land. Then, of course, there will be a discussion, there will be challenges coming up. We have worked very intensively with all the parties to find the best solution, to try to meet everybody's concern. Of course, it's always a compromise. You have to take into account that there are 27 different realities that are applying the same regulation. That's why we need to get to a compromise. And again, as said, certain rules were there since the last 30 years, and we needed to create a bit more modern frame. When it comes to controls, I think that we made the best effort to guarantee opportunities for third countries, but also to grant to consumers certainties on the integrity of the product. It's true that the organic sector is based on the confidence that the consumer has on the logo, and we really have to strive to maintain this confidence in the consumers. So getting to a maximum level of operators of 2,000 in a group of operators, I think it's healthy for the group as well, because how could we guarantee the integrity of the product when we were talking about groups of 80,000 operators? That's really difficult to manage, even for a very good internal control system. And so I mean, these are all steps that we took to really create, to reinforce the sector and to reinforce the logo.
Thank you, Elena. As you said, we have to make an effort really to understand the balance between local adaptation and harmonization. Of course, I don't think it came from IFOAM that we want to derogate to basic principles, also because it was IFOAM to establish the basic principle, and we will never want to go out of the basic principle. So local adaptation has to always be in the framework, of course, of the principle, first of all. So respect the principle, respect also the EU regulation, and also to be transparent, because we think that the best thing to avoid unfair competition is also transparency. But anyway, we have really few minutes left. Thank you, Elena, for the feedback, and we see that we can continue the dialogue between IFOAM Europe and the Commission, and that's very good. I want just to go with the other question to Marian and Michelle, please, very short, because really the time is running. So Marian, we go back to the management of residues. That, I mean, if we start speaking now that 10 minutes are missing, 13 minutes are missing, we will never go to an end. But can you just give us like flavor of the issue at production level?
The management of residues at production level, and just in a few minutes. Emanuele, what
1
you do?
minute.
1 minute. Because it's a complex issue. I think the word complex is really in place here. With the residues, it's complex because residues can be seen as a sign of fraud or active use. But residues of pesticides, can also be seen of a burden that organic farming has to bear, because there are still a lot of pesticides and other substances being used everywhere. And let me make it really clear. We do not want pesticides in organic farming and food production. We do not want it, but we have to deal with it. And in reality, most of the time we are dealing with traces of pesticides. And the sad thing is that in organic farming and food production, the people have become specialists in knowledge on behavior of pesticide residues and the quality of lab analysis. And that's not what you want to work with. And it's already clear that it's a complex issue, because in 2018, the European institutions couldn't reach a real solution. So they postponed more or less the solution for a number of years. And I think this is an issue that really needs a careful approach and a good solution for all the players, how to deal with these residues because of these two qualities. Either a sign of fraud or active use, or a sign of a burden that the society puts on organic farming or the other agricultural sectors. And I'm a bit afraid that it is too much seen quite often as a sign of fraud or active use. And I think we should really see it from both sides, maintain to see it from both sides. Otherwise, producing and selling organic food and farming is really very, very difficult. I think, well, I will not go more into depth now because of time.
Thank you, Marian. The message was very clear. I want to ask also the same question to Michelle, always very short, just for the challenges at control level.
Yes, thank you, Emmanuel. As already Marian mentioned, it's really a complex issue, and it's not new. I think there's positive aspect in the new regulation, trying to clarify some aspect in terms of responsibility of operators and also what a CB or control authority has to do. I think there's a very tricky point, which is investigations, which is sometimes complex to identify the sources, and the danger is to be overloaded by investigation when it is linked only to very traces of pesticide, and we should focus really where the problem are. And I think the Commission is aware about this, because when we see the ETO, the ethylene oxide in the sesame seeds, we see that we imported there was sesame imported with very, very low level, but also with very high levels. And to make the difference between these two kind of aspects and investigation to be conducted even in India or in other countries, how complex it is. It does not mean I do not see this as a problem, but it's a complexity. We should also better perform the investigation from the side of the CBs and also all the sectors. There's a lot of to do, but we should keep in mind that organic production is a process system approach, and we want to verify that people are compliant with the requirements. And sampling and testing are tools to help us to identify some ways if people does not follow the requirements. But when it's come to traces, I think we must not overestimate the problematic of pesticide residue and within the levels, and maybe also to have according to more scientific knowledge, also to make a distinction between certain level and how to act with this. But it's a long process, and I think we should also time to time to assess the situations. I know IFOAM is working, IFOAM Organic Europe is working on pesticide residue and contamination, and to be able to supply to the Commission also when we will be these revisions and discussion on pesticide, to try to find a way and a balance. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. The word that I hear more is complex. So we have a complex sector regulated by a complex regulation with a complex implementation. So everything is complex, but this is good, because biodiversity is also part of organic, and it's good to have differences. It's good to have many differences. Elena, I come back to you with a question also coming from the audience that is interesting, let's say, and it's if organic producer exporting from the EU all over the world, they are a bit afraid of retaliation of third countries excluded from equivalency. So what do you think about that?
Well, just if I can just add a little point on what Michelle and Marianne has said before. I mean, for me, the question of residue is a very important question. You know that in Europe we had different system of approaching the sector, the issue. So this is really the first step we can make forward to harmonize the situation. We couldn't really keep a situation in which there were at least three different approaches. That was not good for the sector, not good for the operators. Then you know, investigations, we already discussed it longly. It's already spelled out in the fishery control regulation, and of course there is this revision in a few years, and we are happy to keep on discussing on this, which is, I think, a bit the core or one of the core issues of organics. Then going to the exporting all over the world and producers afraid of retaliation. I mean, we cannot grant equivalencies based on nothing. I mean, equivalencies equivalency is really a huge responsibility that we give to a competent authority in third countries, because we, in equivalency, we recognize the control and production rules as equivalent to those as set up in the EU. So it's really something that we have to take care of. We have really to analyze all the differences, try to match to get to fill the gaps. And in the meanwhile, of course, for every country can export to the EU if they have control bodies recognized by the EU for this specific country. I know that we have discussions with the competent authorities all over the world to get this message through, and we have to say that we have very positive feedback also in the way that a competent authority want to collaborate with us in improving their organic system. So it's, I mean, Rome was not built in a day, and not even equivalencies can be done in 1 week. And it's a mutual, I would say, confidence that we have to create between competent authorities from the two parties.
Okay, thank you very much, Elena. We also want to remind that equivalence, as also in the EU, we have many different contexts, let's say climate context, geographical, also all over the world there are even more differences. So it's important really that equivalency is based on the principles and of course on unfair competition as always. Okay, thank you. I see a question also that says, do you believe that the new legislation will step into force in 1st January 2022? I don't think there is, I will not ask you, Elena, but I mean, it was already postponed by 1 year. So it's impossible to have another postponement. But as we said during this session, we really have now to start applying it. And we hope in a bit of, let's say, constructive approach at the beginning by everyone, member states, commission, operators. We need some time, it's a new adaptation. Yes, so the answer is yes, for sure. Okay, is there any conclusive sentence? It's just one sentence to conclude this session. What do you take from this session, just really in one sentence? So please, Elena, just one sentence.
One sentence. Let's start applying the regulation and keep on communicating and discussing on the issues that arise.
Okay, thank you. Marian?
I think I agree with Elena. And I want to really keep the word flexibility and adaptation high.
Okay, thank you. Michelle?
I would say to keep a constructive dialogue that we already have with all stakeholders and the commissions and institutions. Yes, again, we need a collective effort really to make it implementable then on the field by the operator. Okay, so I think this is the last Congress after many in which we present together with experts the challenges of the future new organic regulation, which eventually comes into force next January. The Congress next year, instead, there will be again a session on regulation as always, but it will be after some months of implementation. So it will be a different one compared to the last 8 or 9 Congresses. I want also to remind, as Michelle also said, 2 interesting projects of IFOAM Organics Europe. One is it is about residues. Thanks to partner and sponsor, we are really carrying over this project on residues, and we want to present a proposal to the Commission and the Member States. And we are starting also a kind of, let's say, regulation reading of the new organic regulation. So as it is very complex, we want to help the sector to understand the regulation. So we will see how to do, but in the next weeks you will know more. So I want to thank all the speakers and the participants. We invite you to join the next session, that is Rural Development, Long-Term Vision for Rural Areas, that it will be in 16 minutes from now. We have different activities ready for you during the break.
Either you can meet with other like-minded people through the networking function, where you will be connected to other participants willing to, let's say, speed networking in these 15 minutes. Or if you are tired of sitting and want to stretch, you can join a 10 minutes stretch session in the stretch section of the platform that you can find on the top left side of the platform. I want also eventually to remind you that the session was recorded, and you can find it on the Congress website. And again, we will be back at 11:15. Again, I want to thank the speakers again, and let's continue this constructive dialogue. Thank you very much.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the second session, the last day of our European Organic Congress. I'm Eva, Communications Manager at IFOAM Organics Europe, and I will moderate this session on rural development, a long-term vision for rural areas. So I will introduce the session, then I will introduce our panelists, and afterwards our panelists will shine, providing a reply to a question in the form of a statement, and then I will ask a follow-up question, and then there's time for your questions. So dear audience, if you have any questions coming up, please write them in Slido and we will address them by the end of the session. You find Slido on the right-hand side of your screen from where you see me. There are 3 tabs: chat, people, Slido, and Twitter. You can go to Slido. In the Q&A tab, you can insert your questions for the speakers. In the polls tab, in Slido, you can reply to questions we might ask you. Okido. So let's kick off by introducing the topic. So I will talk you through about why long-term vision for rural areas is important for the European organic movement, and I'll also introduce a few terms. So almost half of the EU's territories are predominantly rural regions that house many people and also provide high food quality products and non-food products. Rural areas contribute to the richness and diversity of Europeans' culture and agriculture, and also play a key role in maintaining our natural resources and helping to mitigate the effect of climate change. However, there are challenges that these areas face, and the European Commission wants to address these. I'm happy to say that we have someone from the European Commission with us who will elaborate on that a little bit later on. So as IFOAM Organics Europe, we are convinced that rural areas are crucial to transition to a green and sustainable Europe and make the EU Green Deal a reality. This is why we contributed to the Commission's stakeholder consultation on a future for Europe's rural areas. In our replies, we stressed that organic businesses stimulate rural development as they employ more people than conventional farms, and they also provide ecosystem services like a better health of soil, plants, animals, and humans. In our contribution, we also pointed out that there are policy instruments like the CAP, the Common Agricultural Policy, that you all know, the Organic Action Plan, and Horizon Europe that can greatly contribute to developing rural areas, and at the same time contribute to reaching the targets in the biodiversity and the farm-to-fork strategies. So in our contribution, we also highlighted the role that lighthouse farms, biodistricts, and living labs can play. I will explain a little bit more about these terms, just so we're all on the same page and you know what I'm talking about. So a lighthouse farm is an existing commercially viable farm that is already in 2050 when it comes to providing sustainably produced food and ecosystem services. These farms also demonstrate solutions, give trainings, and communicate about their activities. Then we have biodistricts. Biodistricts are a new rural development model based on preserving the agricultural landscape and biodiversity, cultural heritage, and gastronomy, relating to organic agriculture and food production. I'm happy to say that we have someone who can tell you a lot more about this among our speakers, so soon you'll definitely learn more about these. Then there are living labs. Living labs are user-centered, open innovation ecosystems based on user co-creation, integrating research and innovation processes in real-life communities and settings. So these 3 concepts, lighthouse farms, biodistricts, and living labs, have the potential to revive rural areas. But before we get into the nitty-gritty of it all, I would like to know where our audience is coming from. Normally, you should soon see a poll arrive on your screen, and that is asking where you're joining us from. So this will be in Slido in polls. And we will have a look at the replies in a little bit. First, we will have a look at a video. So we will show you a video of Fruitfontein Farm, which is a Belgian farm that matches quite a few of the criteria that I've just explained. We visited this farm with our office in 2019, and I'm happy that Alexi Liedekerk, the person who guided us, wanted to explain a little bit more about the farm, including some nice images of the farm. So Alexi is the founder of Fruitfontein Farm. He's a bioengineer by trade who specializes in agroecology and social entrepreneurship. And he will tell you more about the farm. So unfortunately, the video only has English subtitles and is in French. But yeah, we will see you soon after the video, and then we'll hear where you're coming from and where our speakers are coming from.
Bienvenue à la ferme de Fruitfontein, une petite ferme pilote ici sur la commune d'Avlanges où on essaye un prototype d'exploitation qui permet à des petits acteurs économiques, des producteurs, des artisans de mettre le pied à l'étrier et de lancer leur activité. Donc, le projet de la ferme consiste à rassembler ici sur les 50 hectares et dans les bâtiments une multitude d'indépendants, des producteurs, des artisans, mais aussi tout autre entrepreneur ayant un projet, une idée, quelque chose à développer ici en ruralité. Et l'idée nous est venue parce que, en fait, quand on n'est pas fils ou fille d'agriculteur, on a énormément de difficultés à accéder à ce métier. Donc il y a pas mal de jeunes ou des moins jeunes qui ont envie de se lancer dans le secteur, mais qui se retrouvent face à des obstacles très importants, qui sont premièrement l'accès à la terre, dans un pays où la terre coûte très cher. Et puis deuxièmement, c'est de pouvoir gérer non seulement la pratique, le corps du métier, la production, mais aussi tous les autres aspects qui s'accompagnent du métier. Donc ça veut dire la commercialisation, la comptabilité, l'administratif. Et ce sont des choses qu'en tant que producteur, on n'a pas toujours le temps de faire, ni le souhait de faire. Et quand on est un petit acteur, maîtriser ces éléments-là, c'est très important, notamment parce qu'on veut faire le pari du circuit court, parce que parfois on n'a pas l'échelle pour jouer avec des volumes suffisants que pour s'en sortir. On peut voir la ferme comme un essai. On essaye un modèle par lequel ces acteurs vont se mettre ensemble pour mutualiser toute une série de métiers. Et donc, ce faisant, ils mutualisent des compétences, mais aussi des coûts. Et donc l'idée, c'est que si 15 producteurs se mettent ensemble derrière un site internet, qu'ils achètent ensemble une camionnette et qu'ensemble ils payent un comptable de temps en temps, ça va leur coûter moins cher que si chacun fait ça dans son coin. Ça, c'est, disons, les principes de base qui sont à la fondation de ce projet ici. On a commencé à lancer des appels à projets en 2017 à la recherche justement de producteurs, de partenaires qui auraient envie de se lancer ici. Et aujourd'hui, la ferme se compose d'une activité maraîchère qui est représentée par 2 indépendants. Il y a un éleveur de volailles, des coucous de Malines. Il y a un producteur grande culture, donc qui fait des pommes de terre, des carottes, des oignons, mais aussi des céréales. Il y a une productrice de savon qui est en essai ici pour le moment à la ferme. Il y a la cidrerie qui était déjà implantée ici à la ferme, la cidrerie du Condreau. Et il y a également des projets plus scientifiques et sociaux. Il y a par exemple un projet de recherche qui consiste à suivre la population des pollinisateurs à la ferme et de voir comment est-ce que la population des insectes évolue en fonction des changements des pratiques. Il y a aussi un projet éducatif qui a pour but de créer des formations pour adultes sur les alternatives sociétales dont on a besoin aujourd'hui.
Okay, welcome back everyone. That was Alexi. I hope you enjoyed the video and learned about the work that he's doing on his farm. So I will introduce the panelists. I will give you a short description of who they are, and then I will start by asking them their opening question. So the first person who will join us is Silvia Michelini. She's the director responsible for rural development at the Directorate General for Agriculture and Rural Development, which most of us know as DG Agri at the European Commission. Before assuming this position, she was head of unit at DG Agri and held various posts and positions within the Directorate General. She has an extensive knowledge on, among others, payments of the Common Agricultural Policy, rural development in Spain and Portugal, and agriculture free trade agreements. The next speaker is Salvatore Basile. He is the president of the International Network of Ecoregions and general secretary of the Cilento Bio District. Salvatore is an agronomist, expert in sustainable management of territories and creation of local networks. In 2004, he codified the biodistrict model, starting from the Cilento territory experience in the south of Italy. He's responsible of planning and scientific activities in more than 20 international projects and co-president of the Global Alliance for Organic Districts. Our next speaker then is Doris Letina. She's a young farmer from Slovenia who works on her family's farm, focusing on the production of apples. Doris studied economics at the University of Ljubljana and received a qualification in agriculture. She is also the vice president at SEJA, the European Council of Young Farmers, and an active member of the Slovenian Rural Youth Association. And last but not least, we have Luis Saldanha. Since 2009, Luis is chairman of the board at the Portuguese National Young Farmers and Rural Development Confederation, CNG. He's a member of several monitoring committees for the CAP in different community frameworks, a member of Agricultural Markets Observatory and agri-food imports, and he studied farming engineering, business, and marketing. He's also responsible for a family farming. So welcome all. But before I start by asking you some questions, let's have a look and see where our audience is joining us from. Can I please have the results of the poll on the screen? Thank you so much. Okay, it looks like most of you are still joining us from your home office. I think many of us are in the situation. Normally, I'm also still working from home, but for the occasion, I came to the office again. And there's even a few people joining us from the field, which is quite nice, and a nice spot in the sun. I'm a little bit jealous of the last ones. So without further ado, let's go to our speakers. Our first speaker is Silvia. Ciao, Silvia. Where are you joining us from?
Hello, good morning. Very happy to be here, and I'm joining from my office here in Brussels, but it's sunny, so almost a sunny spot like some of our participants.
I hope it's not a sauna spot soon.
Okay.
That's very good to hear. Okay, thank you so much for being here. I was wondering if we could hear a little bit from you about an update of the Commission's long-term visions for rural areas.
Sure. I'm actually very happy to have this opportunity to speak about this important initiative. I have just a few slides, just 2 or 3 of them. If they can be put up, that would be nice. But just for a start, I wanted to recall a bit the framework of this important initiative. And we can go to the first slide where I have a nice image of our president, Ursula von der Leyen. And already at the time of the political guidelines, she actually put very much rural areas into the radar of her action. I think she's very aware of the importance of rural areas. You mentioned some important data, Eva, in your introduction. And if we look at the rural regions overall within the EU, they occupy more than 80% of the territory, and we have more than 135 million people living there. So it's clear that rural areas are important politically, and certainly the president has looked at it very carefully. Here you see very nice words. They are fabric of our society. They are a bit of the economy. They are core part of our identity. So it's really a lot of focus there on that, and also on what we want to do. So the idea is really to have a vision looking at the future and working with the people on that. And indeed, if we go to the following slide, you will see a bit how the process has been evolving. So under this political impulse from the president, indeed, the Commissioner Wojciechowski will intervene later also in the closing, is in the lead for this initiative, working together with the Commissioner in charge of cohesion, Ferreira, and under the coordination of Vice President Suica, who is in charge of demography and democracy. So already this setup shows that we're talking about a very wide vision. And this is a bit the key word I would like to highlight first. It's an holistic approach we are having here. We're not working in a kind of tunnel or silos approach. We are looking at vision in a very wide way, looking at all the different aspects, also the sustainability, looking at the social, environmental, economic aspects, so in a very wide way. Now, of course, I cannot enter much in the details because this Commission communication will be adopted soon, so I will also leave a bit of suspense there. But I would like to say that, and here we can go to the next slide. I think, yeah, we can move to the following slide. This vision is a kind of house we are building on 3 pillars: public consultation, analysis, and foresight. And here the second keyword of vision would be participatory. So it's holistic and participatory, because even for the collection, for example, of the analysis, we really went to look at studies and all the research which is out there. For the foresight, given that it's a long-term vision, we want to have a perspective up to 2040. We involved a lot of not only researchers but also stakeholders to help us depict, how we want these rural areas to look in the future. And also we've been, we've not been writing this in our offices or home offices in Brussels. We've been really collecting information and input and feedback, including, and you, Eva, reminded also the contribution from your side, which was very valuable indeed, to this open public consultation, which we opened in the autumn last year, and which attracted quite a lot of attention. We got more than 2,000 replies from citizens, organizations. And then we also did a barometer survey to take, the pulse of citizens. We went out even in very remote areas with some stakeholders workshops, even spontaneously organized based on some toolkit which we provided. And in March we had an important week, the Rural Week, where we tried, to collect all these and to make sense of that, and even to collect more feedback and more input. So from all these, we learned a lot, and I would say there are 2 main issues which I would like to recall, and I hope that then in the questions we can come back to some of these aspects. One is the diversity. It's clear that we are not going to provide one recipe which is good for all the rural areas. If you are looking at areas close to towns or cities, we're looking at aspects which are very different from the ones of rural areas in very remote zones of Europe. Second aspect is that the respondents of this consultation themselves indicated that there are some important issues we need to look at. And I mean, I'm not discovering new things, but they've been really highlighted very much in these consultations. We need to look at infrastructure, think of pharmacies, hospitals, schools. We need to provide and make sure that we can bring these services to the population, or at least to provide the right connections to that. So we're talking also about transport connections here. Then the digital divide, which is still very important between rural household and the average of EU households. Then economic opportunities, quality jobs, which are also there, how to attract youngsters, including in the farming sector. And here in this panel, we have a representative also looking in particular at these aspects. And I would say that it's this consultation also highlighted a lot of opportunities for rural areas. It's not only about challenges, it's actually we can harness some of the assets of the rural areas. We are talking here about the possibilities of new economies, the bioeconomy, the circular economy. There is a key role of agriculture. After all, I mean, agriculture is still part of the backbone of these rural communities. And certainly we want to strengthen the importance of agriculture for the development of rural communities. We want to strengthen the organic farming sector. We may come back to that. You know very well that we have a very, very ambitious target for the organic sector. And we want also to see a lot of economic opportunities coming from these evolving consumers' demands who are more interested in organic farming, quality products. So it's there are a lot of opportunities out there. And also, just let me mention also the pandemic, which has revalorized the countryside, and not only during the pandemic. I think it's going to stay. The proof is that we are, I mean, still many of us teleworking, and probably also in smart work in the future. So just to conclude, I would like to say that this is really a vision from the bottom, coming with a lot of ideas and analysis, a concrete one with steps which we will propose, where everybody could contribute. So just stay tuned. In the next few days, you will see what is there, and certainly the engagement and commitment of different actors will be key also in the future. Thank you, Eva.
Thank you very much, Sylvia. That was very informative, and this forms what you said about the potential of organic farming and of agriculture in rural areas forms a perfect bridge to Salvatore. Ciao, Salvatore. You are joining us from Italy. Where are you joining us from?
Yes, hello everybody. I am in Ceraso, a little municipality in the south of Italy, in the Cilento biodistrict.
Okay, in the Cilento biodistrict. Yeah, a biodistrict, we've heard a lot about it. And as Sylvia just said, there's a lot of potential in them. So they can be a good tool to develop new business models in rural areas. As someone who's been pioneering, could you tell us a little bit more about them, please?
Yes, of course. Thanks, Eva, for your first introduction to the biodistrict. So I will try to give a short definition. First of all, the biodistricts, also called organic districts or ecoregions, in Portugal, bioregiões, are territories where farmers, citizens, public authorities, and other local actors realize a formal agreement aimed at the sustainable management of local resources based on the principles of organic farming in order to boost the economic and socio-cultural development of rural territories. So the biodistricts can contribute to the long-term vision of rural areas, of course, and the participatory and inclusive community of a biodistrict with all the local actors involved acts on the territory with a virtuous governance that decides from the citizens' level to shift toward a real local, real sustainable, and real healthy food system. The biodistricts are the practical demonstration that is possible to shift from a sectorial to a territorial approach. The people don't live in sectors, but in places. The biodistricts aims to improve the quality of life of residents in rural areas, to increase the power of attraction of rural areas, boosting the connections between strategies of sustainable development of the rural and the urban areas, to increase the employment opportunities and, of course, of the quality of the jobs, to promote the active engagement of youth and women, to promote and improve the European and international cooperation of rural areas. The biodistrict's impacts for the revitalization of the rural areas are, first of all, social, but also economic and environmental. For example, from the social point of view, we have the access for the local community to sustainable and healthy local food, the employment of local population, in particular youth and women, the reduction of population's decrease in rural areas. From the economic point of view, the biodistrict improves the coordination among all the stakeholders. Thanks to external economies of scale, small farmers will have an easier access to investment, physical input services, and markets. Of course, we have the green public procurement, for example, in the organic school canteens. From the environmental point of view, it's easy. We have, of course, the improvement of the air, of the soil, and of the water quality. We have the biodiversity improvement and more ecological infrastructure. The first organic district was established in 2004 in Cilento, where I am, in Italy. In 2014, the International Network of Ecoregions was established. The international guidelines and the toolkit for the creation and management of biodistricts have been developed. Now, thanks to a project, a European project, the Ecoregion, founded by the European Commission, new international guidelines will be developed and made available for all the countries interested to start with new biodistrict. So, at the end, until now, we have 48 biodistricts operating in Europe. The countries where they have been implemented are Italy, Portugal, of course, France, Austria, Switzerland, and Spain. And in other countries, the constitution process is under development. So, as you can imagine, the role of the biodistricts can play in the revitalization of the rural areas is of very great importance. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Salvatore. That was very helpful to know more about this. Then let's move on to our next speaker, Doris. Hi, Doris. It's good to see you. Are you joining us from Slovenia, and where are you calling us from?
Yes, greetings from Slovenia. I'm calling you from sunny region of Pomorje.
That sounds amazing. Okay, so I'll part straight into it. So we've heard a lot about rural areas. How does your ideal vision of a rural area look like, and what role is there for young farmers?
So first of all, rural areas should provide decent life. So I mean here a place for live, for developing on our personal and also business level, and also providing of quality spending of leisure time. That's the vision, I would say, and not just in long term, but starting today, as soon as possible. So if you let me, I will point out 7 areas of action which we identify in our CEJA manifesto. So first, everything starts with knowledge and education. We need to acknowledge the role of peer-to-peer learning, then use of this all the new technologies, lifelong learning, but even if we have all the knowledge on the word, there's still something missing to implement all this knowledge. So investment support and financing opportunities would be my second area. So one of the biggest challenges in rural areas is land access. If you want land, you need money, but it's also how to develop businesses from zero, from very small amount of some resources, how to diversify it. So just just for a short example, young farmers are more often refused when they go for bank loans. So this investment support is crucial. And then social dimension. It was already mentioned by Salvatore, so I'm very glad. Preservation of the social fabric. We need social inclusion of youth and women. Then social and care services and in rural areas. Not just this, also cultural and leisure activities. Health service and insurance are also key points. So some specialized doctors, hospitals, and then also the topic that is growing, especially in these days, awareness on mental health and well-being. If I can just point out the numbers from Slovenia, we have serious issues because nobody really take in account this mental health. There are five times more suicides in the profile of farmer than any other profile. So that's something we need to take into account. So if we go on infrastructure and connectivity, we cannot imagine, especially in these days, being without this broadband. But here are also basic infrastructure, which is still not everywhere. So roads, waste management services, and so on and so on. And you know, sustainability has three dimensions. We already mentioned economic, social, and the third one for sure is environmental. So here also environmental and climate actions, acknowledgement and encouragement of carbon storage, then greater focus on innovation, energy policy. So there's still a lot to do. And today I'm representing CEJA, as you said, European Council of Young Farmers, and we are the voice of Europe's next generation farmers to the European key decision makers. So last but not least, how to support rural youth and young farmers organizations, not just young farmers, but all kinds of organizations in rural areas. These services are often related to skills, trainings, knowledge exchange, then full inclusion in decision-making at all levels of governance. So that are areas that needs to be 100% filled if we are speaking of ideal version of rural areas. You also asked me what role do the young farmers play in it. I would say the key role, because we are the future of rural areas, not just future of agriculture, but of whole rural areas. We are not just living in rural areas, but with our activity, with our farming. We are not developing just farm, but also rural areas. It is much more than just farming and providing food. If I get example, if I get a decent payment for my work, I can develop my farm. I can provide income for some other people in rural areas who is helping me, who is working for me. So helping that can also provide that they can provide, I don't know, piano lesson or karate training for their kids. So that's very broad story. I maintain the landscape. I take care of biodiversity responsibly. And this is, I'm sure we are all aware, but still this is strongly linked to tourism, not just tourism, agrotourism, but much broader. And that could also be a trigger for all the new businesses in rural areas, which needs to be sustainable. So it is very broad and multiplicative story.
Okay, thank you very much, Doris. You painted a very good picture. Thank you so much. Then let's continue paint that picture. Luis, hi Luis. It's good to see you. Are you here just by audio? Yes. Okay. Good to hear you in that case. Hi, where are you calling us from? Hi, Luis.
Eu tenho microfone, se mudei o microfone, se calhar está no auricular.
Okay, so
Posso mudar, se
I'm just
calhar.
asking Luis to get the microphone closer to his mouth because I cannot hear him clear enough for the interpretation. That's all.
okay.
I think he's changing the headset now. Oh, that's better. Wonderful.
Igual ou está na mesma? Melhor?
Luis is ready.
Okay,
Well,
perfect.
good morning. Good morning. I'm from here in Lisbon.
Não nos tem deixado. Ah, peço desculpa. E agora está melhor? Está melhor? Pronto, peço desculpa, tá? Ora bem, então bom dia.
Well, good morning to all. I'm in Lisbon. I'm at home because with the lockdown in Lisbon now brings us to this situation. We have view to the taggers, and thank you for the invitation to be here today in this conference, which is of extreme importance in my view. Well, concerning the issues that have been asked by Eva, of course, that bioregions, and Salvatore mentioned them, are a very important factor, are very important for the development of farming, despite the fact that in Portugal, regions are not homogeneous. They're not among themselves. It's completely different talking about areas which are by the seaside or far away from the seaside. When we talk about the far away from the seaside in the interior of Portugal, when we talk about access to land, the issues are very similar to other regions of Europe. The question of public services, schooling, health infrastructure, communication. So these are all factors that limit the fixation of people, the young farmers, and not only, to these areas, in these rural areas. It is important that the European Commission has a vision, a medium and long-term vision about this, because we know that we cannot have this asymmetry between among all the different regions, but not just between the country, but also inside the countries themselves. Concerning funding, well, it's a very important point, as long as they're directly, appropriately. What we would like to say is that in Portugal, we have a bioregion which is in a certain manner more implemented, which is near Edanha Nova. And we think that the best way to approach is through this manner. Why? Because we cannot only think about organic production about only production. We have to think about territories, like Salvatore said, and rightly so. Because if there's more participation, not just for the farmers, but all the stakeholders in this process, everything else will be much easier. And the approach and the vision that we must have is integrative, that in which all are winning. But that's not happening. We have to recognize the advantages of this way of production, but also access to the products which are produced. And the question of markets, namely the markets and distribution, and the public markets like schools, hospitals, as way of to bring those organic products to the public, are fundamental. This is probably one of the vehicles, or one of the ways to bring the products, organic products, to all. I'm not sure if you can hear me well. I can hear you wonderfully. I'm going to tell Luis that I can hear him, and he cannot hear me now.
Pronto, tudo bem. É que como não estava.
Well, Luis is asking because he does not see that anyone reacting, and he was not aware that he was being listened to. Well, organic farming can, in a certain way, contribute for this change. Today, we have a very predictivist logic of organic farming. When we talk about competitivity, is if you can produce in big quantities, and the logic of production, but we have to think about revenue. We have to think about profit. production in having to produce a lot because the prices for the farmers are, well, they're not well paid. And so we have to produce more and more. We have to invest more resources. We are consuming more resources, water and others, with all the impacts, negative impacts that they may have for environment and the soils. And through the organic farming, we can invert that. It's much more important to think the yield, but not just the quantity which is produced. Very often, producing less is better because we can have more profitable. And when I say about the public canteens in hospitals or in schools, that can contribute a lot if our organic products can reach those spaces. And then there's an issue with big distribution, big supermarkets. Maybe this is not the forum to talk about that. There is a big problem at the European level, which has to be seen in a European context about distribution, and this is limiting our growth. And it's also important to finish that the production has to be directed to consumers. I'll give you an example. In Portugal, 70% of the soil for organic production are pastures, which is not for production directly of organic products, and we think that should be changed, and it should be directed for consumption goods, feed, and so that the consumers can take advantage of those products or those organic products, they can eat them. And this is all I had to say for now. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Luis. I'm sorry about the technical difficulties, but I think we heard everything that was crucial. So that's great. Before moving to the audience questions, I have a follow-up question for Sylvia. Sylvia, what role does the Commission foresee for biodistricts in their long-term vision for rural areas? Because biodistricts were clearly mentioned in the Organic Action Plan. It would be interesting to know, and I'm sure many of our listeners are curious.
So thank you for this question. I must say that I've also learned a lot through the description of Salvatore about this, and I was actually I think it's a lot of what he says coincide with the spirit of the long-term vision. I noted, for example, this participatory and inclusive aspect of the biodistrict. This is very much in line also with also the spirit of rural development. We have a lot of this bottom-up and inclusive cooperation action. And also I've noted, among other points, the urban rural aspect, which I think is very relevant, something also which is in the radar of the vision, because we need to work on this rural-urban link further. So what I can tell you is that also from what I listen, from what I know of the biodistrict, there is a clear, I hope everything is fine because I had just a cut in my screen. No, very good. Is very much in the spirit of the Green Deal. We are talking here about, you know, Green Deal as growth strategy. So definitely also the biodistricts are very much in this spirit of growing economic opportunities, but also an occasion for more social interaction, and certainly also an occasion for a variation of tradition, gastronomy, culinary tradition. So all this is very much, I know that there is a place for that and is in the radar of the action plan for organic farming. What we know, what we do is very much interlinked. So what I can tell you that this is something which could be very promising and corresponds very much to the spirit of the long-term vision. And I stop here, but certainly this exchange today is very useful also to construct, because the vision is going to be constructed over time with different actions. So looking forward also to continue the reflection on that.
Okay, thank you so much, Sylvia. That was very, very good to hear. Now let's ask Salvatore a follow-up question. So as I said, the European Organic Action Plan mentions biodistricts and also invites member states to support this new approach. What kind of support would rural biodistricts need?
So thank you, Silvia. I think that first of all, we need really a European support for the development of the biodistrict. Also, in order to facilitate the implementation of the provisions of the European Organic Action Plan. It is very important to provide all member states, many of which will have to develop their national organic action plans on the basis of the European one, with all the necessary information on what is a biodistrict and the guidelines to follow for their creation and management. It is also necessary to provide adequate financial support for the development of high quality experiences of great impact on the rural areas. As I mentioned before, the European Commission has founded an Erasmus Plus project, which started last October, which aims to define new guidelines for the creation and management of biodistricts. These guidelines have been defined by INER and by the partners of the project, AGROBIO from Portugal, CIAE from Spain, and Bergerie Nationale. And these guidelines will be published in this book in the next autumn. So I have a proposal. It would therefore be very important to organize a European conference in Brussels or in other places, perhaps in the autumn, promoted by the DGs involved in, by IFOAM, by INER, to provide the member states with all the tools they need to promote in the correct way the new biodistricts. If all this will be done, I see a great development of a European biodistricts in the next years, because they have already proved in 17 years of life that they are able to revitalize in a concrete way the rural areas.
Okay, thank you, Salvatore. That was very concrete. Great to hear that. Doris, I have a question to you, because we've heard quite a lot of biodistricts. Are any of Seja's farmers part of biodistricts, or living labs or lighthouse farms?
So we have we are covering very diverse agriculture. We have big farms, small farms, high tech, from high tech to low tech, organic, non-organic, and every farm has its own strategy. And as it was explained before, also environment in which they are, with which they are surrounded, is extremely important. So some have better predispositions, others have needs to find own niches. But I need to say that definitely some farmers are part of biodistricts, living labs, and like lighthouse farms. But that should not be taken from granted, because predisposition is that we need strong food chain and also transparency along the whole food chain. So fairness and appropriate payment for farmer or foundation. And I can probably say that young farmers are more than open to all these new models for innovation, constantly learning, and on the end of the day, it's important not just to empower young farmers, but also to have support. And I just want to point out two different stakeholders, because there are many stakeholders from which we are support is needed. So policymakers. So I am extremely glad that DG Agri has such a good vision that are helping to develop this kind of new models. But the second stakeholder I want to point out is consumer, because demand is the key leader, and consumer is the one who is saying what kind of agriculture he wants to have. So how is that with buying or not buying? So it needs to be the whole. It's very nice to see all these good examples, but they are just examples. We need the whole strategy, the mosaic of different these good examples, and then we can say that we are successful.
Okay, thank you so much, Doris. That was super insightful. Then we have seen a few questions coming in the chat. So they are about bioregions in Portugal. Luis, which new bioregions are planned to Portugal? Any Portugal to the Douro Verde region? I'm really sorry if I'm butchering Portuguese.
Tá sim? Estão-me a ouvir de novo?
We can hear you, Luis. Yes, I confirm. Well, the region that is best developed in terms of bioregion in Portugal is Idanha Nova. I think there was a presentation about Idanha Nova yesterday, if my memory is correct, because like I said before, these bioregions, they demand the involvement of all the local agents and national, not just farmers, but also municipalities, mayors. It's also production and tourism. And Idanha Nova is the one that has demonstrated doing what it's doing and can demonstrate how it's been working and how the involvement of the young farmers have been done. So they supply products to Lisbon from this Idanha Nova in a project that was presented by AGROBIO, together with the help of a small municipality. And there's hundreds of meals per day for local schools, for primary schools. This is an example. Despite the fact that it's kind of far from Lisbon, there is a supply which is programmed along the year, and all the products, they go to Lisbon. In the north, Douro Verde, the process is a bit late, and for now, there's an engagement from the local stakeholders, but the process now is not as advanced, unfortunately. But we hope, of course, that we can reach and be successful. And it is very important, as it was referred, that there is a proof, demonstration of the functioning of these regions and how it is important and how is it possible to have the involvement of all the stakeholders. Because if we have the practice, if we can replicate to other areas, we can motivate others to create these regions. And there is another one in Alentejo. It's another region. There's another bioregion which will start soon. But the one that is most known and with better results is the Idanha. The one in Douro Verde is not developed to the point of being implemented right now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Luis. Then I see that there's also a question for Salvatore. Salvatore, the audience is asking if there are any difficulties in getting the different involved actors to work together. I'm really sorry, but we are running to the end of the session, so could you be super brief?
Yes, first of all, only for tell that there are other two bioregiões in Portugal, São Pedro do Sul and Alto Tâmega. Okay, we have normally a general assembly that manage an ecoregion. We have normally an association, private-public for the management. And inside the assembly, we have all the stakeholders there that can decide, can take a decision. And in particular, you can imagine that in Cilento, we have 40 municipalities involved in our biodistrict. So you imagine 40 mayors from right to left, very different colors from the political point of view. They finally found all the times an agreement for and other things. It's very important. We have on board all the stakeholders, the processors too, because I see that there is a question about this. But not only the social farming, for example, is very important. We have disadvantaged people involved, environmental associations, and so on.
Okay, thank you so much, Salvatore. We are nearing the end of this session. I'm so sorry to hear, but before closing the session, I would like you to ask you to reply to our poll, asking if you've actually gained some knowledge from this session. So I'm sure you will see the poll in Slido now. Unfortunately, you don't have a lot of time, but the options are to reply are, yes, I learned a lot, both about rural areas and the Commission's vision on them. Yes, I already knew a lot about rural areas and learned more about the Commission's vision specifically. Maybe you did not learn very much, but you want to learn more. And then it's also possible that you did not learn a lot, but you enjoyed our virtual company. So I am interested to see which replies come up on the screen. So I'm waiting to see them on the screen any second. I'm really sorry not to give you a lot of time. Let me move this window. Okay, so the majority of you did learn a lot. So that is great. I think we've achieved the goal of this session in that case. And then there's a few who enjoyed our virtual company. So what is left for me to do then is to thank you, all of our speakers, for joining us today, for your time and your insights. As I said, I really enjoyed it. I liked the conversation we had, and I learned loads myself too. Thank you so much, Silvia, Salvatore, Doris, and Luis. And of course, I would like to thank all of you, our virtual and physical attendees, for taking part to this Congress, and everyone who made the event possible, both from the content and the technical side, of course. As I said, we are almost at the end of the Congress. I will hand over the virtual floor to Jan Plagge, IFOAM Organics Europe's president and the commissioner. But due to the technical restraints of having a digital Congress, this will take a few minutes. So again, thank you everyone for being here. It was a pleasure. Stay tuned for another couple of minutes for the closing session.
Hello, everybody, dear colleagues, dear participants, dear colleagues in Portugal, in Lisbon. I hope you enjoyed all our sessions during the Organic Congress. And now, for me, it's a real pleasure to announce you live from Brussels, our Commissioner, Janusz Wojciechowski. We observe that Mr. Commissioner, that there's really a lot of tension during the negotiations and the common agriculture policy and all around your efforts to safeguard the Green Deal and the Farm to Fork and biodiversity strategy. And we, as organic community, we really appreciate the engagement of the European Commission and of your DG Agri and yourself in engaging for the Farm to Fork targets, and especially for setting very clear words for the development of organic farming all over Europe. And we are on your side, and we are very much connected and committed to your strategies. And that's why we are very thankful that you are here with us, giving the last speech at our Congress. The floor is yours, Mr. Commissioner Janusz Wojciechowski.
Thank you very much, Mr. President Plagge, and thank you for your warm words. Good afternoon, everyone. It's wonderful to be back here, although again virtually. Over the past few days, you have gathered from all across Europe to discuss how organic farming contributes to the European Green Deal. You have also discussed the challenges faced by organic farmers. I am honored to be with you today to reflect with you on your observations and conclusions. In your opening statement, Mr. Plagge, you emphasized that the organic system approach in the European Union is a European success story. And you are right, the European Union is driving the global agenda on sustainable agriculture and sustainable food, and that is also thanks to the organic farmers in Europe. And while we cannot really solely on organic farming to achieve sustainable agriculture and sustainable food, organic farmers are the pioneers, the leaders of the sustainable agriculture of the future. As you are aware, the European Commission published its Farm to Fork strategy and biodiversity strategy in last year. We also introduced a target included in those two strategies of 25% of the EU agricultural land under organic farming and a significant increase in organic aquaculture by 2030. We are convinced that within the European Union, we should aim for a type of agriculture that combines the best environmental and climate action practices, a high level of biodiversity, the preservation of natural resources, and the application of the high animal welfare standards and high production standards in line with the demand of a growing number of consumers. To be able to achieve the 25% target, it is necessary to provide tools that will create the right incentives that can trigger the change in European Union agriculture and aquaculture towards the high quality standards that EU consumers value. In support of the 25% target, the Commission has adopted in March this year the action plan for the development of organic production. It is organized along three axes: production, processing, and retailers and consumers. It speaks to challenges you have discussed during this Congress. I'm happy that you have welcomed this plan, and I am counting on you to make the implementation of this plan a success. You are leaders in this field and you should continue to lead the way. I have often been told that the transition towards organic farming is not always easy. Moreover, it requires participation from actors from all parts of the food supply chain and all levels of governance. Our organic plan acknowledges that one-size-fits-all approach will not work. Production and consumption differ significantly between member states, which is why it is crucial for each member state to develop as soon as possible its own strategy. Each member state should set ambitious national targets for the area under organic farming. The plan therefore asks member states for a comprehensive, fully consistent set of interventions in support of organic production in their CAP national strategic plans for the support that can be provided via the CAP and in their national organic action plans for the support that can be provided outside the remit of the CAP. We are prepared to do our part from Brussels, in addition to taking a holistic approach and taking account of the specific situation of each individual member state. This plan foresees tangible financial and non-financial support for converting and staying in organic farming and more broadly for organic production. We plan to mobilize a number of the EU programs and instruments like the Common Agricultural Policy, including the Agricultural Promotion Policy, the EU Research and Innovation Framework Program Horizon Europe, and Green Public Procurement. Under the next CAP, for instance, financial support will be provided via the eco schemes in the first pillar and via the agro-environmental management commitments in the second pillar of the Common Agricultural Policy. The Commission encourages member states that already perform well in this area to continue this positive trend. We are also encouraging other member states to set up their organic plans through the CAP. The targets on paper shall become a reality in the agriculture land. The previous plan has made it clear that farmers in particular need to be supported with advice on how to convert. To this end, the CAP will increasingly provide advisory services and technical support, and support the exchange of best practices and innovation. We want to reduce the opportunity cost of converting to organic farming. Support specifically for small farmers is also foreseen, and this via, for instance, the exploration of the use of dedicated producer organizations, group certification and initiatives focused on short supply chains and local processing. It is important to emphasize that the implementation of this plan has already started. The European Commission has already stepped up its efforts. This year, the agricultural promotion policy dedicates 27% of its budget, 49 million to the promotion of organic products. Also, the review of the school scheme mentioned in the action plan will kick off soon with a public consultation. I invite all of you to participate and to share your views. My hope is that these actions will also serve to reinforce the role of organics in the agri-food chain. Let's us all, farmers, retail, decision makers, work together and make this action plan a success for the sake of sustainable agriculture and sustainable food. I call upon IFOAM and all organic stakeholders to continue to share best practices and to inspire one another with your organic farming experiences to move closer to our 25% target. To lead by example and motivate all levels of governance, member states, regions, and cities to develop or update strategies in support of organic farming and organic production strategies. To help the Commission disseminate concepts like biodistricts, to address some remaining sustainability weaknesses in terms of energy use, water use, plastics, and continuous inputs to make organic farming even more sustainable. To help farmers, but also food processors, wholesalers, and retailers to convert to organic production. Together, we will signal to the outside world that the European Union takes organic farming and organic production seriously and wants to prioritize for the future. Maybe I'd like to add that personally for me it's very important to use this chance, which organic farming is first of all for small and medium size farms. In the last years, we lost millions, during one decade, 4 million small family farms, which were not able to participate in the competition with intensive large-scale farming. I'm convinced that organic farming, this is the chance to develop small and medium-sized farming, to protect them and to give them opportunity to develop in the future. This is very important to use this chance which organic farming is. One again, thank you very much for possibility to present my point of view, and congratulations for the Congress. We are very interested about your conclusions, and we will take into consideration in our future work. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your encouraging speech, Mr. Commissioner. I think there were really important messages for all of us, for the whole agriculture community in and especially for our colleagues in the member states, what the Commission seeks for and what is our task in the practice, in the member states, in the regions now to do and to fulfill. Thank you very much for your engagement in expanding organic farming and helping farmers in general to find a good future for their farms, for their families, for the regions, and for the whole food system. So I will try to wrap up now the results of this Congress in Portugal and virtual all over Europe. We had a lot of participants. I said it at the beginning, we had more than 1,300 registered participants and a lot of engagement all over Europe. And even outside of our continent, there was a big interest in our discussions on the future of our food and agriculture system in the European Union. We started a discussion on the ongoing CAP negotiations. That was, I think, for everybody who's involved in the common agriculture policy, a very interesting panel where we saw that the Commission, our colleague Tassos Haniotis in DG Agri is very involved in the negotiations and drafting the Commission proposal and the whole further development. And he clearly said that the member states have to deliver now with the strategic plans. From our observation, we presented our first results from our survey from the member states, that the member states are not everywhere, and in most member states are not willing to deliver and are not willing to take a serious planning process for the further development on organic land, organic markets, biodistricts, or whatever is needed to reach the farm to fork targets. This is not happening, or not happening at this time. And that is why we need a very strong alliance from the European Commission, from the sector, from the engaged people in the regions and in the member states to really make the plans on organic farming inside the CAP strategic plans as an obligation. This is still under negotiation. And that they, as the commissioner just said, that every member state have to put the target into planning figures, budgets, and measures on the ground. So that is our challenge, and that was a key result, that this challenge is not fulfilled yet, and that we have a lot to do, especially on the ground in the member states. In the second panel, we learned a lot about the organic farming development in Portugal, and I'm really thankful for my colleagues from AGROBIO, Jamie Ferreira, and all engaged people who presented the evolution and the impact of organic agriculture in Portugal, and the clear projects towards 2030. So we learned that organic farming is a very important part, and that Portugal is committed to the 25% organic land target. A very important issue was the discussion on climate mitigation and carbon sequestration, the so-called carbon farming initiative from the Commission. So that was deeply discussed, and we saw that the participants and we as community welcome the incentivization of carbon sequestration in soils and the carbon farming initiative. But we have to consider some important experiences from the practice. We should not rely primarily on offsets to reach the Paris agreements and the EU objectives on climate. The potential of carbon sinks in agriculture is limited. So we have to be a bit careful not to project too high expectations on one side, and on the other side, we have to be careful to integrate the farming system in the carbon markets. So if we look on successful farming systems all over Europe, which are successful in sequestrating carbon into their soils, it is a long-term task to convert the farming systems, and this long-term investment of farmers are a bit in a contradiction to the short-term carbon market prices, so what we see by now. So the EU policy should incentivize solutions to pay for carbon sequestration, but in a long-term and in a very careful way. In this discussion, in these sessions, we saw a lot of more beneficial for biodiversity that make farming systems more resilient and more adaptable for the impacts of the upcoming climate change, what we have to face. So protecting biodiversity and resilient ecosystems, minimizing inputs, will also bring a lot of benefits to the climate. And whereas focusing only on carbon intensification risk keeping us in a business as usual. In our fourth panel, we discussed the whole shift of our food system to a sustainable food system. So again, we welcome the Commission Farm to Fork strategy, which we understand is a holistic approach which not only focus on agriculture or on food processors. So this is the right way and it's the right strategy to go. And we discussed that we need a systemic thinking when it comes to sustainable food systems and for involving relevant stakeholders at all levels. The Common Agriculture Policy as it stands does not reflect by now the European Green Deal objectives as much as it should. In this line, we fully support the European Commission in the final negotiations on CAP to really implement binding the Green Deal targets in the CAP strategic plans. The resistance from the member states, what we face from our agricultural minister in Germany, which is my minister, and we saw the reaction from the environmental minister that this is a really tough current power game, and that there's a lot of interest not to have binding targets which are necessary for Europe, for the whole world, for the European citizens. So we wish the European Commission and the European Parliament as well to be really clear that these targets of the Green Deal are a clear part in the Common Agriculture Policy. So it was interesting. This was really an important part which was discussed in our panel on sustainable food systems. The Sustainable Food Systems legislative framework was another issue, will be the first of its kind in Europe. It may be modeled in a similar way as the general food law, and it will cover sustainable public procurement and specifically minimum mandatory targets for organic in sustainable public procurement. It is set to also unveil a sustainable label. This legislative proposal is expected in 2 years by 2023. IFOAM Organics Europe welcomes the idea of this proposal, but is concerned that this sustainability label may be built on the concept of product environmental footprints. That tool does not recognize all those things organic farming and food is good at, like biodiversity or soil fertility. Well, this is an ongoing discussions, and we will intensively follow that discussion or this legislative labeling process on the European level. In our fifth panel, we reflected the current state of play on the organic regulation, which comes into force on 1st January 2022. It's very important for all stakeholders to keep the dialogue open and being continuous in contact between the sector, the movement, the Commission and the member states. We all find it very important to find a balance between harmonization and local adaptation. Europe has many diverse regions with many different farming and food production systems. Commissioner Wojciechowski just mentioned it, many organic farms, the big majority of organic farms are small and medium-sized farms, and they need local adaptations and a good balance in the local adaptations. But indeed, local adaptation does not mean at all to derogate the organic principles. In the last session this morning, we discussed rural development concepts, a long-term vision for rural areas. And it was really interesting to see the discussion between the Commission initiative, which will release a communication based on participatory and holistic consultation for promotion organic farming at a local level. And we learned that the idea of bioregions or biodistricts is very important for the future development of rural areas, and especially that organic farming plays an important role for the rural development in rural areas. And that will follow up a lot of exchange, knowledge exchange, and EU support for this biodistricts is crucial, especially to force member states to use this concept in their regions. We made a lot of very good experiences from Italy to Germany to other member states with this idea of biodistricts. So at the end, now these were our panels with a lot of active discussions. I have to thank a lot of people. At the beginning, to the European Commission and again to our Commissioner Janusz Wojciechowski for being with us. I have to thank all speakers, all experts who discussed everything what I just tried to wrap up, which was much more what we learned and what we discussed. And a very warm thank to our organizing team in Portugal, in Lisbon, from AGROBIO and IFOAM Organics Europe. From AGROBIO, I have to mention our friend and the director, Jamie Ferreira. Jamie, you did a really good job with all your colleagues, with Sandra dos Reis, Marta Batista, Aurora Fialho, Madalena Ramos, Ines Efigenia, Pedros Frias, Antonio Lopez, Sandra dos Reis. I hope I got it more or less right with my German slang. And from IFOAM Organics Europe, I really thank my team, our team, for the event organizations. Nuria Alonso, Asta, Donny Later, Molly Matthews, Eva Bergmann, Verena Mischke, Katharina Sehm, Gali Kau, Ilaria Barbonetti, and for sure, all my colleagues in the policy and regulation unit, our director, Eduardo Coco, Silvia Schmidt, Erik Gall, Emanuele Busaka, Miriam Geda, Bram Meskop, and who was much in contact with all our sponsors, Johanna Wierzbika and Francesca Lilio. Thank you very much, all participants. You see how many people are involved in such a Congress, and it's a really great teamwork. And last but not least, a very warm thank to our sponsors, Green Organics, Naturland, Solo e Salute, Nutrimais, Valora Italia, Comimbra, Agriculture School, AgriCert, Miosotis Store, K from Spain, Trade Corp and Trade Corp International. Thanks a lot. Without your help and your sponsorship, such a Congress is not possible. to organize. I have to remind all attendees, all participants, that all sessions are recorded and all presentations of the Congress is available on our website from this European Congress, europeanorganiccongress.bio. Thanks a lot for attending. Thanks for everybody for the discussions. Stay in contact. I hope we meet physically very soon and that we make Europe more organic, make the Green Deal targets real in all regions of Europe. The Farm to Fork strategy, 25% organic, is an important step, and there's a lot to do in the next month and year. But this can just be done together with a lot of communication, collaboration, and a lot of willing to meet and to work together. That's Europe, and that's what we are doing and what we are committed for. Thanks a lot again, and have a good day and stay healthy. Thank you very much.